The date was March 2010, and I was taking a break from my second playthrough of Mass Effect 2 to read my Game Informer magazine, which is where I first laid eyes on Dragon Age Awakening. At first I thought it was a standalone title, but upon double checking it was an expansion, which makes sense, as at the time, Dragon Age was shaping up to be a next-gen Baldur's Gate, so of course it would have its own expansion set. I ran down the next day and picked up a copy, and remember loving every minute of it. And after DA2 came out a year later, I would often run through all three games, trying different world states. That is, until Inquisition and Dragon Age Keep came out. After that, I no longer felt the need to do full playthroughs, and instead played the games I loved, which was Origins and Inquisition. This left Awakening and 2 on the shelf for about 5 years or so, which is why I wanted to take an in-depth look at both, but to focus this video, I'll only be discussing and analyzing Awakening. I'll be covering the main quest in detail, and I'll be doing every side quest, but I'll mostly talk about the ones that catch my eye. I'll also be covering every companion in detail, so disclaimer now, I will be spoiling all of Awakening, and some of 2. So sit back, relax, and so my longtime viewers don't think I lost my touch, welcome to the world of Dragon Age. So normally in these videos, someone would summarize the intro, but Awakening's intro is rather concise, so I will let the immortal Robin Sachs take this one.
With the death of the archdemon, the Blight was defeated. But the Darkspawn did not simply disappear. Most of the Horde scattered north from Denerim towards the coastlands, and there fractured into warring tribes. The region fell into chaos as the Darkspawn emerged from hidden lairs to terrorize the countryside. As the new Warden Commander of Ferelden, it is your responsibility to rebuild the Order and deal with the lingering threat. You have come to Amaranthine to join the rest of the Grey Wardens at Vigils Keep, once home to Arl Rendon Howe, but now property of the Order.
So just for a little more context, Awakening takes place 6 months after the Archdemon is slain, and in every other Blight before this, the Grey Wardens would have curb-stomped the Darkspawn completely into the Deep Roads. However, they instead regrouped to the region of Amaranthine, and are still at Blight strength. Wysop promoted you, the new hero of Ferelden, as Warden Commander, and have assigned you to deal with this threat, with a moderate amount of Grey Wardens, because only someone as badass as the hero of Ferelden could get this threat down with minimal resources. We see the Keep in flames, and save a fleeing soldier alongside our escort Myri, a Grey Warden recruit and a Knight of Denerim. So we carve through a surprisingly small amount of Darkspawn than what we are used to by now, and finding a terrified merchant in the process. Further in, we see a stray soldier who asks us to go across the courtyard to grab some bandages, which is an entire 2-minute journey, but that's okay. Inside the keep, Myri wonders how the Darkspawn took an entire group of Wardens by surprise, which is a good question, but those questions get quickly overshadowed when we meet our newest boy.
I didn't do it. Hey, I recognize you from the circle. I know what they've been saying about me, but this, not my doing.
This is Anders, an escaped circle mage who borders the morality scale of sarcastic and selfish, but also caring and altruistic. Also, he's wearing the same outfit as me, so one of us has to change. He was captured by those now dead Templars, who we don't ever get a clear answer as to what happened, but besides that, he offers to not sweat the minor details and focus on killing Darkspawn with him, so I'll oblige. So we carve through more Darkspawn till we open up the lock gate, where we witness whatever the hell this is. Once again though, our burning questions are alleviated by what's just around the corner. The tavern music and that hand wave just crack me up every time, with how goofy it is. But yes, Oghren is back, happy to see us, and ready to join the Wardens, which is kinda surprising, especially if we became friends with him and found him someone to settle down with, and move past Bronca. But it's nice to see a friendly face, and Steve Blum is always welcome in my group. Well, just past the door Oghren was, we see a near-dead soldier, who Myri identifies as a friend and fellow Grey Warden recruit. He tells us there's a lead Darkspawn who captured the seneschal of this keep, but more importantly, he says there's a talking Darkspawn among them. Anders and Oghren think he's drunk some really good shit to see a talking Darkspawn. We'll just pass a group of non-talking Darkspawn. We encounter a scene that gives us more questions. So we witness this Darkspawn do a clear 300 reference, which was a good reference in 2010, but then he says this.
Be taking this one gently. We are wishing no more death than is necessary.
So yeah, this Darkspawn not only talks, but has a degree of intelligence and empathy, which is definitely a good hook to get us invested in this mystery. This Megamind spawn is also our first boss, and maybe it's because I'm playing on Nightmare, but this guy can take a beating, making this fight longer when compared to everything prior that we faced. After the fight, we go to the entrance with the now freed Seneschal, Robin Sachs, also known as Veril, to reunite with King Alistair and an average Templar with an above-average stick-up-her ass. Alistair greets us like old buddies, but laments that we are now on our own, more or less, to fix this pseudo-blight problem. The aforementioned Templar interrupts this reunion of old friends to Alistair that this filthy, disgusting mage... Oh wait, wrong one. This filthy, disgusting mage needs to be executed right here, right now. She's apparently certain that Anders killed both of the Templars, despite just hearing that the Darkspawn ransacked the keep that those Templars were in. Alistair chimes in if we want to deal with this, to which we can pull a Duncan and invoke the right of conscription on Anders. Or we could let him get taken, which is awesome player agency, as even if it kinda screws us over, we can send away every new companion we get in this expansion. Also, if you're wondering why my characters keep changing, it's because this scene has a weird bug where everyone practices holding a glass of wine, and even reloading back to the fighting the boss previously before didn't fix it. Fast forwarding to the joining ritual, which gives us a nice throwback to when we were on the other side, almost a year ago. Anders and Oghren become Grey Wardens, and Myri does not. I have to applaud BioWare for this trick though, as every temp companion in a base game had no XP bar or approval, making it obvious who wouldn't be staying as a permanent member. However, Myri actually gains levels and gains approval and disapproval throughout this opening, so bravo for the bait. We oversee one last setup scene, where our two last advisors bicker over what main quest a player should do first, and then the game finally opens up to us. This is Vigils Keep, our party camp for this expansion. It comes fit with a few merchants, and an enchanter who's not Sandal, so no one cares. Our companions are here too though. Unlike in Origins, where you can have conversations at any time, in Awakening they will only talk to you at preloaded points usually, after a companion quest, or after a certain approval point is met. I'm not a huge fan, but there's plenty of content these members have, given the game's length overall. You can usually find an object near the companions that can start a conversation with them if you interact with them. So it does give us some options. Outside the keep, there's a load of side quests to pick up. There's Vuldrik, the Dwarven engineer contracted to improve the Vigils walls, which requires a gold investment and finding better materials. There's his brother Dworkin, who we met earlier. He provides us explosives to fight the Darkspawn if we bring him the materials. Heron and Wade are back, and will make armor for your soldiers if you have the materials for those as well. There's the Keep Sergeant, who has a substantial quest for us to investigate how the Darkspawn got into the Keep, and to find a permanent fix for it. We'll get back to that in a moment. Finally, we have a soldier that acts as our courier for side quests, given to us by random nobles of the region. But more importantly, she pulls us aside when we first enter the courtyard and tells us about a prisoner that was captured before the attack, who took 4 wardens to bring down, and non-suddenly tells us he would make a good recruit. Well, interested in having a complete party again, we head over to dungeon where we meet a particularly scowling individual, who taunts us for being the hero of Ferelden. This is a interesting change of pace, as everyone who recognizes you is either in awe or shits themselves, so it's a pretty ballsy move. Well, we find out soon why he's trying to stab us with his scowl, as this is Nathaniel Howe, Wending Howe's son, who we killed for helping Loghain, or because he butchered our whole family, if we were a human noble. He came here originally wanting to kill us, but he then had the often rare maturity to realize revenge wouldn't solve anything, and instead just recover some sentimental items from the keep, where he promptly got captured. Well, I'm going to deep dive into companions later on. For now, he reveals his roguelike skills and contempt for us, where then my guy makes the executive decision to invoke him into the Wardens. He survives the joining, and now we have a full party. The last opening section before we can really set out has to do with our coronation ceremony. When Alistair gave Amaranthine to the Wardens, he also gave us control politically as well. So now the Warden Commander of Ferelden now becomes the Jarl of Amaranthine. This is really cool, but it doesn't really affect as much as it probably should, but it still plays a part in this expansion. So we get a nice post-ceremony party where everyone can make a few decisions on troop movement to gain favor, with a few nobles, but more importantly, we learn of a conspiracy against us, which brings up a key problem in this expansion, which I should cover now. So in Awakening, you can actually play as your hero of Ferelden, or if you don't want to import a character, you play as a random Orlesian Warden. I suppose the main reason for this was if your character died and you didn't want to break lore by resurrecting him for the DLC, or if players just wanted to play Awakening without an origin save. But personally, I'd rather have a small lore break at the start by resurrecting a dead hero for Ferelden, as this possibility of playing the game as an Orlesian creates a lot of scenarios where people react or say things to my character as if their history doesn't matter. Especially later on in the game, it seems at the start there was plenty of dialogue referring to your origins, but as it went on later in development, I think maybe the two branching pathways got harder to write for, which is really unfortunate. The reason I'm bringing this up here is the reason for the betrayal of the Orlesian Warden makes sense, as not only is he a more unknown fighter, unlike the hero Ferelden, who has slain the archdemon and countless more, but the reason for disposing the new Orlesian ruler makes perfect sense given the suspicions Ferelden have after being just freed from Orlesian occupation 20 years ago. Now that they are being told to follow an Orlesian again, damn right some of them would plot against this. However, the basis of the plot against the hero Ferelden is that a lot of these nobles thrive because of Howe's corruption, and now that he's gone they want revenge, mostly out of greed it seems. This is a pretty weaker excuse if we weren't the hero Ferelden. But since we are, it's a damn stupid move however you slice it, as not only are we known to be powerful, but we also have insane influence and political power. We are trusted by the king and loved by the people. Killing us would be a nightmare for these greedy assholes. I think the reasoning would be better if it was by origin. For example, mages don't traditionally hold titles, so maybe if you were a mage, the nobles suspected you of being a Maleficarum or worried that they're being too much like Tevinter. Or, if you are a human noble, Wend and Howe did accuse the Cuslans of working with Orlais, so maybe that could be their reasoning for betraying on a human noble. Just some differences would have really helped this, but keep in mind my rant on the Orlesian Warden as it will come up later as well. Fortunately, despite this conspiracy being half-assed, we do have several ways to handle it. We can take several members from the noble families hostage in an attempt to cow the nobles into submission, which does work, as cruel as it may be. We can also hit up a local crime lord who specializes in information, or we can simply do nothing and wait for them to try whatever it is they're planning. I'm going to go with the Dark Wolf, which we will cover in a minute. Before we head out for side quests, we can go talk to each of our advisors to receive our 3 main quests. Our keep's captain wants us to investigate a Deep Rose Entrance, which he believes is a Darkspawn breeding ground, which means broodmothers. Vero informs us that one of the Grey Wardens left before the attack to gather information on the new Darkspawn threat, so we need to track him down and find out what he knows. Finally, Mistress Woolsey, a Warden Treasurer, informs us that Vigils' keep and Amaranthine economy is in terrible shape due to the attacks on the main trade route, and she gives us a Merchants Guild contact to find out more. Woolsey is the most interesting of the 3 to talk to, as she actually works for the Wardens and informs us that serving as the Jarl was actually the first Warden's decision, to see how Wardens can navigate political power. She also references Warden's Keep as the last time a Warden commander had political power, and how Severe fucked it up so bad, Wardens were exiled from Ferelden for over a century, so everyone's counting on us to prove the public bias wrong, which would be a huge win. So our first side quest has us exploring the basement of the keep, with the help of the sergeant clearing some rubble to clear the way. The first living thing we encounter is actually a Sigma Bari carrying a scroll. This scroll is from a woman named Adria who got trapped deeper in this basement during the attack and sent to Mabari to go get help. But unfortunately, Mabari got trapped by the cave-in. The interesting factor here is Nathaniel recognizes Adria as the only mother figure in his life after his own mother passed away. So we have a personal connection to this rescue already. Well, after dispatching some darkspawn and ghouls, we meet Adria who... yeah, she's infected too. Now we have to put her down to finish the quest. Seeing Nathaniel's reaction of pure disbelief is really memorable. It made me feel really bad, despite not even knowing who Adria was. The basement is also really cool, with a secret passage with some loot, as well as this large crypt with a locked gate, with 4 keys that we don't have yet. The quest continues later on after you finish one of the main quests, so we'll touch on this a bit later. The next quest brings us to a small cave in the open world. These bandits have kidnapped a noble's daughter and we have to get her back. We have several ways to do this. We can simply pay the ransom, trick them into giving the girl to us before they get paid, then killing them. My personal favorite though is telling them you're the Warden Commander and Slayer of the Archdemon, and making them collectively shit themselves and killing off the stragglers, now that they are disorganized. Definitely a pretty fun quest, even if it's really short. With this brief sojourn in the side quest, we can finally reach Amaranthine, the main trading hub of this expansion. There's a lot to do here and a lot of cool stuff to buy. Unfortunately, it's not as interesting to explore as, say, the multiple districts in Denerim, as Amaranthine is very packed together, with basically every area serving as a scene for some quest. The first encounter we get is a shady character offering us some work before we even enter the gates. Then as we enter the gates, we get stopped by the guard demanding to search us for smuggled goods. This sets up the central conflict in Amaranthine, where we can decide to help the guards, or we can help the smugglers, which gives me a Fable-ish vibe, so I'll be showing both sides now. The guard side, the captain tells us to go meet a smuggler contact in the markets, saying that if a guard approached him, he would just identify him and run away. Well, we don't fare much better, as immediately when we talk to him, he realizes we were talking to the captain and sicks some smugglers on us. We then have to do a loop around the town, fighting an army of smugglers to keep on pace with the smuggler contact. We chase him all the way to the outskirts of town, where he disappears into a locked door by the abandoned house. Going back to the captain, he lets us know that we must have found their main base, so we head back to the shady character who first approached us where we entered. After killing him, we can get the key, and where we meet the smuggler leader, who we also promptly kill, completing the quest. A reward is a small bounty and free reign to loot the place for several treasures and a few gifts in this little smuggler hole as well. On the smuggler side, we go over to that abandoned shack before even talking to the captain and get asked to bribe a bartender in the tavern to open up an underground passage back to the area where we just fought the smuggler leader. The smuggler leader apparently has a connecting chamber to the tavern, which allows the smugglers to get inside the city without the guard knowing. We go over to him and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna need some more money before I keep betting some crimes. We throw some gold coin at him and move on to the next task. Apparently some rival smugglers are stealing their loot and they don't want to get their hands dirty, so we get our hands dirty instead. After killing the thieves, the smuggler leader just sort of spawns in and gives us one final task to kill a guard lieutenant that is investigating them. This involves a rather chaotic sequence of events where we go around town killing guards until we find the right guard with the key to the tower where the lieutenant is hiding. Well, after offing the lieutenant, we get a key to open up and free an imprisoned elf who's like, hey commander, need an archer? So he joins the keep and actually plays a part in the final battle. And that's the quest. I gotta say, it's as close to a supervillain as you could get to play in Dragon Age, and I'm sure it should be satisfying to more selfish roleplay characters. The only issue I have is that the actual reward for siding with the smugglers is never said anywhere, but siding with them actually improves the main merchant in the keep's inventory with unique items and in even better silverite rune tracings. This can give a path to unlocking Masterpiece Silverite runes, which give plus 16 damage to Darkspawn per rune, which, considering 80% of the enemies in this expansion are Darkspawn, is really overpowered. I just wish at one point one of the smugglers would say, hey, if you help us, we'll make sure you have access to our special stock, not available to general merchants. This would have actually given more incentive for me to actually side with the smugglers, as I almost never do, because I just assumed that both sides would just give money, so it's a matter of, do I want to be evil and selfish, or do I want to just help people? And generally at this point, I feel like helping people is kind of how the Warden is set up to do, more or less. The last quest I want to cover here is the conspiracy plot. As Vero suggested, we should head at Amaranthine and look for any leads. Well, luckily, the wolf we heard about is looking for us as well, and gives the guard a note to meet him in the corner of town. He tells us he's willing to help you uncover the plot because he believes we will be more just rulers than the current corrupt nobles, and asks for 50 gold. So maybe he's just feeding us a line. Now there's really weird interaction that can play here. If we completed the Slim Coldry quests back in Origins, we earned the title of Dark Wolf, meaning this guy is someone who just took our Warden's name, just for the renown and business opportunities that would come with it. Well, we can call him out on this and he'll just say, "Shit, I just thought he was dead, man." When we express more anger towards taking over our title, he just goes, "Well, it's not like you can use it right now, being the Warden Commander," which is total bullshit, but we don't have the option to press him further on it. We have the option of killing him, but it's because our player wants to turn him in instead of being pissed he stole your title. At the very least, I feel a speech check should unlock you convincing him he owes you for his use of your name, and you should cover this for free. I don't know, it just seems out of choice for a Byro game to not give us more ways to handle a side character like this. Begrudgingly, we give him the gold and he says come back later, which means after one main quest is done. As I said at the start of the video, I would be playing every side quest, but I only talk about the ones that stand out. Well, these are the only ones that really did. There are more later, which I will still cover, but the majority of quests in this expansion are running around, fighting items or notes to pick up, or fighting enemies that don't give much context, and are just hostile to be hostile. Unfortunately, the first 3 quests, which are the dungeon and the ransom quests, are all really interactive and interesting, but then the third one is just go to a farm and kill Darkspawn. Unfortunately, that last example is how most do go, which means it's just a quick 5-minute investment for gold and nothing else. The gold investments are really high, which is good because there are really late game armor, so it's kind of a power fantasy I guess they wanted to do, but unfortunately for an analysis like this, I really can't say anything more about them. Also, before you type that comment, I do know there are companion quests in Amaranthine, but I'll be covering those in a companion section, so just hold on up on those for now. Anyways, on to the first main quest. So just like in Origins, you can do the main quests in any order. There are 3 to tackle given by the 3 Vigil Advisors who will send you to Amaranthine first. I'm going to start with the Deep Roads quest first to pick up a companion we will meet momentarily. This has us talking to these 2 scavengers who were exploring Knotwood Hills, when they fell into a chasm at the same time as a patrol of Darkspawn were entering the chasm. However, the Darkspawn appeared focused on entering a Deep Roads entrance and paid the 2 men no mind. Our companions note that it's basically unheard of that the Darkspawn would ignore the opportunity to kill 2 helpless victims. While entering Knotwood ourselves, we're greeted with an imposing chasm with man-made bridges to descend below. Well, if the Deep Stalkers and the Dwarven architects aren't clear signs that this is a Deep Roads, this next scene will. This is Sigrun, a Legion of the Dead scout whose sardonic views on death are matched only by her chipper sarcasm. We'll talk more about her later, but for now what we need to know is she was the last survivor of a Legion squad assaulting the old Dwarven Tig of Kal Hirol, before the Darkspawn and the Tig overwhelmed them. Sigrun survived because she fled as the squad was being killed. This wasn't enough to turn Sigrun away from launching a solo suicide counterattack against a Darkspawn army. Well, Sigrun confirms her suspicions that Kal Hirol is a breeding ground, so that's enough for my warden to go in and even bring Sigrun back for some vengeance. Now, as much as Sigrun and Anders' sarcasm battles would be legendary, Anders is spec'd way too similar to my warden, so I'm gonna tag him out for Sigrun, and spoilers, get used to seeing her cute dwarven self.
Excellent. With your help, destroying this nest is no longer impossible. Merely improbable.
Oh, an optimist then.
So Sigrun thankfully gives us some much needed lore on Kal Hirol. Kal Hirol acted like a Dwarven research center where smiths were able to work and experiment freely. This area holds up to that idea by having plenty of high-level rune tracings and top-tier armor and weapons to loot. Hooray for DLC loot fests! Well, Sigrun wasn't entirely accurate about saying she was the only one left, as before we can even fight any Darkspawn, we meet a Legion of the Dead survivor who holds on just long enough to warn us about a new spawn type, the Children. Well, as we reach the entrance, we meet the Children, who are these grub-like creatures who can cause overwhelm and even eat Darkspawn corpses to grow. They mix up combat a bit, but to be known as abominations by this guy, you think they would be this really deadly force. Speaking of deadly force, Sigrun stops us after the fight and gives us a choice between taking the direct route into the fortress or finding a side passage and missing most of the traps that killed her squad. This fight isn't as bad as Sigrun makes it, but the side passage is quicker, so that's what I'm taking. Well, further in, we see some ghost theater, which finally fleshes out all the lore in Kal Hirol. During the fight of the First Blight, like every other Dwarven Thaig, Kal Hirol was under complete siege. But unlike other Thaigs, they offered the lower caste and even casteless arms to defend the city, essentially making them die warrior caste. This is proven by a stone carving made by the Shaper further into the Thaig. We can take this carving and have it delivered to Orzammar, which might shake up the traditional status quo, especially if Balaam is king. But either way, the scenes we get here are definitely the most memorable part of this area, but it does make me wish some of these were full cutscenes instead. But that's just me wishing for a Dragon Age remaster. Other points of interest further in include a stone golem forger to repair a few broken masterworks, which is really cool, but every remaining piece after this golem is for some reason fully repaired. It almost seemed fitting to maybe gather all the pieces scattered around the whole map and then circle back to the start and repair them all. Or maybe even doing a small side quest to fix this golem so he can repair the broken armor. As is, we repair some of the pieces, then fight a mini-boss and a puzzle for the other two, and then just slap it on Sigrun. Well, at least it looks cool. There's also a third scavenger who brings up one of the weirdest dialogues in this expansion. So he overheard the other two back in Amaranthine about the Thaig and decided to run in ahead of us to get some easy money. Unfortunately for him, the Darkspawn were not distracted anymore and threw him into the cage to be tainted or something. He understandably wants out and offers us a dwarven treasure he found, and Sigrun calls him a thief. So, like I've been saying, we've been looting broken and fully functioning Dwarven masterworks and long-lost rune tracings. This guy took a single rune. Sigrun says, as she herself is wearing the stolen masterwork armor, that everything here belongs to the Dwarven people. The Dwarven people who lost this Thaig centuries ago and have currently no plans to retake it. I think they added this so we have a reason to kill this guy. I think it would have just been better to make him an asshole, because it wouldn't leave me scratching my head at this hypocrisy. So the real main plot of this area is there's a Darkspawn war happening in Kal Hirol. There's an invading force and a defending force, and Sigrun notes there's two sides of Darkspawn. This unfortunately shouldn't be much of a reveal to the player because of the opening.
And they're fractured into warring tribes.
I think they should have just left that part out so we can be more surprised, but at least we get more information at the end of a really long tunnel. So this blue chainy boy is working for the architect, and this red mage boy apparently is working for the mother. The golem believes the proletariat Darkspawn must accomplish a socialist revolution by allying itself to semi-proletarian wardens. Nah, he's just a sick-ass lava golem. Where the red mage boy, also known as the Lost, won this fight, and then turns his attention to us. Interestingly, he thinks we must be working with the architect, and also has no idea what a Grey Warden is, as he can sense us, but he knows we are not Darkspawn. So he's really confused, meaning even if Darkspawn could get sentience, they may not always possess knowledge or critical thinking, which means we are even more similar to them than we realize. We go through a pretty fun fight here. The golem is obviously on fire, and has more HP than any boss in the base game, also sporting some new abilities as well. The Lost is also a boss monster who constantly debuffs and even throws grease on the floor. This causes the golem to ignite it, which makes the whole room just burst into flames. It's pretty fun. After they're dead, we can proceed to our actual main objective, which was eliminating the Darkspawn breeding ground. Now, a lot of other better reviewers have already covered this segment, but yeah, this could have been a cool fight where you personally kill 1 to 3 broodmothers, showing how strong your warden has become, but instead you just cut some chains and... So with that, we finish our first main quest, and Sigrun thanks us for avenging her Legion unit. We ask her what her next plan is, and she tells us she's going to find another corner of the Deep Roads and flip off some ogre to die gloriously with shattered ribs. I ask her if she wants to do that and still live after by being a Grey Warden, and she is down, so companion get. Finally, as we head back to the keep, we meet our first interaction with the Mother in the form of an out-of-character cutscene. Despite her insanity, I like this scene. It shows the Mother as a conscious force with a foreboding plan, as opposed to the archdemon who just kinda growled at us and Alistair had to tell us, "Whoa, I think he was talking to us, man." Well, we have finished our first main quest, so we unlocked some second set of side quests. So let's knock those down. The rubble in the Vigils cellars has been cleared, so we're finally able to explore the Deep Roads entrance under the keep. This appears to be your standard Deep Roads excursion on the surface, but there's a lot of Avar architecture and shrines here, including a unique shade bound by some kind of device in a shrine room. Well, in order to clear out the Deep Roads entrance, we have to release the shade after fighting it. Then, once we clear out the remaining Darkspawn, the shade possesses a ogre that we had recently killed. What an asshole. After the shade falls a second time, we bring Vuldric and the sergeant down, who finds a Dwarven burial door, constructed by Kal Hirol himself. After witnessing a satisfying door closing sequence, the quest ends, but there is one last optional hidden quest here. In the first cell area of the keep, there is a catacomb that has 4 key slots along the wall. 3 of these keys are in the Deep Roads, and 1 is right here in the catacombs itself. Unlocking the deeper part of the catacombs is where the asshole Shade returns, this time as a revenant, and summons some undead Avar lords. He also has a chance to drop a unique item, so it's a cool hidden boss. Finally putting the Shade down a 3rd time kills it, and we can loot the Avar loot, putting a nice little bow on Vigils Keep. Wade also has a proposal for us to create unique crafts if we have special components. Well, each main area has a boss who drops a unique component, and as you would have guessed it, the lava golem has a shell to start this quest off. Wade offers to make an armor with it, but we have to get a few rare ingredients first. Some of these ingredients are craftable, but others are one of a kind, and we will need progression in a main story missions to get them. Considering how strong each of these masterworks is, it certainly is fair that we have to search and wait till mid-game for them. Heading back to Amaranthine, we can meet back up with the Dark Wolf, who has some information on the conspirators. Well, specifically where they meet. Well, if we take this option, we can head to the farm and curb stomp some nobles while they are only at half strength. This is the most effective option, as it shows betrayal will not be tolerated by the wardens, and it silences all further attempts. If we don't do this method, we will have to fight an ambush later on, which I'll cover when we get there. The real highlight, however, is when you return to the keep itself. In the throne room, Seneschal Varel informs us that as the acting all of Amaranthine, we have the final say in judgment of the land. 3 cases will appear before us, and we have 3 options for each one. What's cool about this quest is that each choice actually does have long-term consequences, as well as gameplay consequences. Also, the quest can have a different scenario depending on whether you have stopped the conspiracy yet or not. The first case in Warden Court is a small theft matter. This farmer stole some grain from the keep, which means he stole from the crown. The law permits death by hanging, which will outrage the people. We can simply flog him and nothing will happen since it's a fair judgment, or we can forgive his crime and conscript him in the army. I choose this option, and it turns out he becomes a very accomplished knight. The next case is the one that can be different depending on the conspiracy state. If you haven't stopped them yet, there's a murder trial for Setemra, who warned you about the conspiracy in the first place. This other noble is responsible, but killing him could further the conspirators' fire against you. You can arrest and lock him up for an intermittent amount of time, which is the fair option, or we let him go and show the nobles that we are a bitch. The case I received, however, is a soldier charged with desertion. Again, we can execute them, which will enrage other keep soldiers to revolt later. A year in prison, which is a neutral option. Or we learn that she deserted to try to save her family, so we can allow her to bring her family here and forgive her crime. Interestingly, if we do forgive her crime, she ends up deserting, and this encourages other soldiers to desert as well, meaning our keep will be far less staffed later in the game. So, off to prison she goes. The third and final matter is thankfully a non-criminal case. Lady Pacton was promised a bridge with incomes to the bridge as well by our Howe. Sir Darren is the current owner of the bridge and claims he lost it only because he spoke against Howe. Options are either to give the bridge to Pacton, but if we aren't diplomatic, Darren will join a conspiracy against us. We can tell Pacton to fuck off because Howe's promises mean nothing, or, funnily enough, we can claim the bridge for ourselves, which grants us 80 gold and pisses off everyone. Now normally I diplomatically give the bridge to Liza, but upon reviewing the recording, Liza is actually one of the conspirators we killed earlier. I guess whoever wrote this scene didn't know about the conspirators quest? Well, I tell Pacton that ghosts can't own property and be gone. She tells us she's going to haunt Ban Esmeralda. Neat. With that, the quest ends, and I have to say this is one of my favorite moments in this expansion because of the branching choices. It's especially cool to see the building blocks for Inquisition's judgment mechanic. And any feature that leads to moments like judging a box of a traitor's limbs or a literal bear is aces in my book. With our side quest antics coming to a halt, we can continue on to the next main quest. Over back at Amaranthine, we can talk to Murthus, a representative of the Merchants Guild, to see about flowing trade through the city and keep once again. Well, Murthus says trade has completely halted because of a string of vicious attacks in the Wending Wood, the only path linking Amaranthine to the rest of Ferelden. The bodies were also displayed after they were killed, which is disturbing. Well, this might be the least Grey Warden-y of the three tasks, but since we are responsible for the Arling, we don't want an economic collapse, so let's get to it. This is also the perfect time to mention that Wynne has a brief cameo in Awakening in Amaranthine. She greets us and says she'd like to help us, but she has pressing mage business to attend to. While asking about this reveals the Libertarian Party of the Circle is pushing to break away from the Circle completely, and they almost have the votes to do it. Wynne, being a loyalist, doesn't want that, and asks us to find her friend Inez in the Wending Woods, who I guess is a more moderate voice. So while we're there, we will keep an eye out. Entering the woods, we find some bandits who give us a weird look, like they were trying to act tough, but until they realize it's their mom comes storming off to talk them off or something. Interestingly, if we're playing a female elf, the bandits will shout, "It's her, the elf! We gotta get out of here!" The Sylvans also make a return, now in a charred form, so that's a welcome new enemy to fight. Clearing through the first half of the forest, we catch this fleeing bandit who's not hostile. He says the bandits just wanted to loot through the already destroyed caravan. He also bolts, saying she's here. Well, she turns out to be a Dalish elf named Velanna, who is incredibly hostile to you, especially if you're human. If you're Dalish, she's a bit more cordial, but not much. Essentially, she claims the merchants stole and are keeping her sister hostage, so she's going to kill as many merchants as possible till they give her back. She then tells us to back off from her and use his wooden-style jutsu to teleport away. The Wending Woods splits into two different sections now, one half for the main quest and one half for the side content. It's probably the best designed of the three main areas of the game, with side quests, a puzzle, collectibles, and even the stone deposits we need to upgrade the Vigils walls. The side quest in this area comes from these talking Avar statues, who were forced into the state centuries ago, back before Andraste, when the Tevinter still owned Ferelden, and were fighting with Avar tribes. The Statue of War wants us to awaken and kill a Tevinter Magister. The Statue of Peace is his brother and wants us to convince his brother to stop seeking revenge. Well, I've been stomping through enemies up to this point, so I just want to see if there's an enemy that can stand up to me. So let's go fight an Ancient Magister.
Let's make this quick, shall we? They're getting sloppy.
Well, that was a bust, but we get a sick-ass sword for our troubles and some Avar lore, which confirms that Vigils Keep does have Avar origins, as the statue refers to it as the Keep of 1,000 Vigils, so I'm happy with this quest overall. Wynn's friend Inez is being guarded by a large Silva named the Old One, who is in fact our boss monster material for this area. It drops heartwood, which we can use to make either a bow or legendary shield. Well, Inez is about as passive-aggressive as she can be, and she's quick to talk shit about Wynn too, blaming her for Aldred going crazy and making fun of her spirit affinity as well. Yep, she's definitely her friend. While Inez refuses to go anywhere until she has some northern prickleweed seeds, so walking a grand total of 35 seconds, we find the seeds and bring it back to Inez, and get some herb recipes and potions as a reward. Yeah, this quest isn't interesting for gameplay reasons, but rather for the future lore ramifications of this meeting. The spark that this meeting causes trickles down into DA2 and Inquisition. The result of this meeting is also revealed in Dragon Age Asunder, published 2 years after Awakening, so they were definitely playing the long game with this quest. Back to our main objective, we can head up to the campsite where the elven woman appeared from. There's about 5 dayless graves and a bunch of Melissa weapons dumped in the corner. Your companions note it's odd how they are placed, as if they were a battle, it would be more likely there would be spread around bodies rather than in a corner. Also, there's a sword that's purposely plunged at the front of the camp for added effect. While exploring, a minute walk from the camp shows a pile of human corpses, I guess hidden out of the way, implying that there is a third party involved, at least for moving the bodies. We get the big-time answers further in from this wounded soldier named Olaf. He's suffering from blight poisoning, but is still coherent enough to clear this mess up. He tells us the Darkspawn attacked the soldiers first, and then dumped the soldiers' weapons in the camp during their own raids on the Dalish camp. Somehow they knew Velanna would react violently to humans after this happened, so there must be some key component that we are missing. Then, after we put this guy out of their misery, the Darkspawn attack us. At least they were kind enough to let us finish our conversation first. Conveniently, we can find an elven trinket on one of them, proving the soldier's story true. We can head over back to the camp to confront Velanna, but after we get 2 words out, she summons some Sylvans and the entire wolf population of the forest to kill us. After committing wilderness slaughter, we can have a chat with Velanna, who is a bit winded from that uphill sprint 10 seconds ago. Well, we can tell Velanna everything that we have learned so far, and after showing her the elven trinket, it is her sister Shirani's. The Darkspawn involvement explains why Shirani survived while the others died, given the Darkspawn reputation for capturing women to turn them into broodmothers, which we can non-subtly bring to her attention. This is enough for her to offer her assistance in killing the Darkspawn. We can also straight up kill her for her crimes, but I've never been one to pass up a companion, especially a Bioware one, so we're bringing her along, more ambiguity aside. Then the Darkspawn attack again. They're getting very polite at waiting for us to finish conversations. They also keep proving their human similarities by forgetting to close doors behind them, so we can enter the mine with no issue. Well, no issue until we hit a sleep trap 10 feet in, set up by this handsome fellow. This is the architect, who we heard about earlier, and he wakes us up long enough to apologize to us before he says he only does what must be done. When we wake up again, our equipment is all gone, and we're in a cell with our other wardens. Velanna's sister shows up, clearly infected with the blight, but surprisingly coherent for her current state. She doesn't tell us much though, other than the Darkspawn have our equipment, then gives us our cell key. If we pass a persuasion check, she gives us a key to the architect's room, but won't tell us where she got it from or any more information that would be helpful. She just runs off to Velanna's pure confusion and horror. Now, this is where I have my first real rant of the game. So, how this encounter is supposed to work is how I described. You are thrown in this map with nothing and have the Fallout DLC treatment of having to scavenge everything you can, and think of even solving puzzles and hidden rooms for better pieces of gear. This is really good because Awakening added higher tier weapons and armor and rune crafting, and a higher level cap and better abilities, while enemies only get higher health and bigger mobs, making non-boss fights very trivial. While losing this gear at least made situations more tactical, the problem that I have is this section is horribly bugged, to the point even multiple reviewers have experienced issues with this section. What happens, as far as most people can tell, is if you have any origin gear in your inventory, that isn't available in Awakening, the game not only deletes them, but also deletes your player character's equipped gear, which means you won't get it back later on. Additionally, because of this, gear that it isn't equipped or exclusive will still be in your inventory, trivializing this encounter. Now, I went through this whole section till at the end I realized I lost my gear. My last hard save was at the end of Kal Hirol, so the footage I have is before I went back, but just know I did do this whole section twice, which took almost 2 hours of lost progress. To get our gear back when it's not glitched, we have to fight 4 ghoulified clones of our party, holding our gear. The first one is Oghren's clone, which gives us probably his best line.
Hey, that's mine! That thing has my things! It's got its sallow, clammy hands all over my doodads, touching my junk! No one touches Oghren's junk and lives!
We also meet this fine fellow. He was actually a Grey Warden stationed at the keep at the start of the game, which confirms Varyl's suspicion that they did take some alive. Well, he's the only one left, and he's been tortured and has his legs shattered. He asks us to avenge him and take the wedding ring back from his darkspawn torturer, and give it to his wife, so we'll happily oblige. There's also a Kunari here who will trade with us and admit to trading with the darkspawn too, so I guess they don't kill everyone, or at least don't imprison everyone. We invite him to trade at Vigils Keep, which gives us a new merchant. We reach the final room with the architect standing over us gladiator style, with both Shrani and a dwarf woman standing side by side. We confer that this is Utha based on a letter we can find in the architect's room. I'll talk about her now since I don't think I'll get a chance to later. Utha is a Grey Warden, and you might think she doesn't talk because of her blight condition, but she is actually a former Silent Sister as well. She joined the architect in the Dragon Age novel series The Calling, which takes place a year before Origins, and she looks like a ghoul because the architect can advance blight in someone's body. Just thought I'd cover her now, because I'll have a lot more to say about the architect later on. While I was explaining this, the architect sicked some dragons on us. This fight sucks, and I swear this is my last rant for a while, but not only are these non-high dragons, which we have fought like 4 or 5 of these in the base game, but their only unique mechanic is they fly in the air, disengage combat, and waste extra minutes of time doing this. Well, after killing his dragons, which I assumed he designed as a new effective torture method of frustration, Utha and Shrani willingly walk away with him. He does some Dragon Ball Ki charging before collapsing the tunnel behind him, without elaborating further. Velanna is horrified at her sister working for Darkspawn and tells us to go after him. Oghren tells her they're probably halfway to the Deep Roads by now. Once she hears this, she's like, alright, make me a Grey Warden. I want to sense Darkspawn to find my sister. It's not a great reason, definitely, and probably the most ill-informed reason to become one, but I tend to follow the Riordan statement, as once someone becomes a Warden, they stay one. Even if they leave, the taint will still be a part of them, and call them back in. So even if she leaves after finding a sister, she'll always be bound to being a Grey Warden through a common goal, so companion get. After we leave the mine, we get one final cutscene where the architect says to Utha her comrades are impressive for killing the time-wasting dragons. But don't worry, I'll fulfill my promise to you, Utha. Come, we must prepare. Man, Darkspawn really likes saying they must prepare. Shrani was not seen in this conversation, so I guess she got lost in the tunnels. Before we head back to the keep one more time, we should stop by Amaranthine to return the Warden's wedding ring to his wife. The thing is, I've done hundreds of these type of quests in RPGs. You stumble upon a dead or nearly dead person and conveniently get instructions on their last will and next of kin. Usually you inform their next of kin and they break down before telling you, "Oh, thank you so much. Here's my husband's legendary gun or armor. He won't need it now." But we arrive in her inn room and some dude is like, "What the fuck do you want with my girlfriend?" She tells him this will just take a second, and then he goes on to tell us how she knew he was going to die soon and how shit their marriage was. We give her the ring, and that's that. Jesus, BioWare, what writer was hurt making this quest? Anyways, back at the keep, there's a peasant revolt currently going on, which can have several reasons for happening depending on the decisions you made, such as troop placement or court decisions or the current state of the conspirators. For example, if you execute the scout for deserting, then some of the keep's soldiers will join the protest. You can also resolve the conflict depending on your choices. Like if you promise troops to the farmland, you can convince them to leave without promising anything. If you do give in to their demands, or troops, or food, it will weaken your rule on the land and more protests will take place in the future. Well, unfortunately for these guys, I just did 3 hours of bugs in that mine, so I threatened them to leave before adding a few dozen frozen statues to my courtyard. Still, it's a very interactive quest, and I appreciate the branching options as always. Also, if you haven't dealt with the conspiracy by now, this is where the assassination attempt takes place, which is led by Ban Esmeralda. Again, this ambush is no threat to our character, and the whole reasoning behind them being loyal to Howe is pretty silly, especially as an Orlesian warden where they say, "The wardens killed Howe, and you're a warden, so that's why we're doing this." Funnily enough, an Orlesian warden makes a joke about how the band's coup attempt was so poor, she would be the laughingstock of the Imperial Court in Orlais, which actually gives the Orlesian warden a hint of an actual character. And if there are more lines like this for an Orlesian warden, I'd actually approve of including him in this expansion. However, as it stands, this is the only time I saw a new background adding to the warden's character. Besides that dying warden husband earlier, he mentions recognizing him, but it doesn't go any further than that. Well, anyways, on to the last main mission. The final main story mission has us looking for the surviving Grey Warden Kristoff. Investigating his room back in Amaranthine leads us to the Black Marsh, a haunted swamp without any habitation that aren't altered by the Thin Veil. In fact, this may be the thinnest veil of an area we have seen as of Origins. Nathaniel can actually give us more information on this area, which is a nice touch since he is the Amaranthine native of the group. He tells us that dark magic overcame the marsh just before the Ferelden rebellions, which would mean this place had been uninhabited for almost 90 years as the Thin Veil drove out everyone in the area. So just like the other two areas, there is side content, but it's probably the least fleshed out of the three. There's a reason for this, which we'll get to. Just keep in mind two things. There's fade walls, which block multiple areas in the marsh, and there's also a giant dragon skull with missing pieces. We can find these pieces scattered all around the marsh, but to get all of them and drop this large wall, we'll need to beat the main quest here. So we find evidence of Kristoff, such as darkspawn corpses and Kristoff's camp, but all we find here is more wolves. Deeper in, we can see the children again, which can be your first encounter with them, depending on which area you did before Kal Hirol. After this encounter, we find Kristoff, or rather his body, and yeah, this is a darkspawn trap. Surprisingly, they're not choosing a direct attack like normal. Instead, a talking darkspawn named the First tells us he works for the mother who we saw referred to back in Kal Hirol. He then gives us a gift, which turns out to be a fade sequence. The First is here as well, apparently not knowing that whatever magic he used would affect him and his darkspawn. We can offer to work together, but he just tells us to fuck off and flings his darkspawn at us to escape. Well, now we are trapped in the Fade, and Oghren is especially pissed since dwarves shouldn't be in the Fade. Amazingly, in one of the rare times of this expansion, he actually has dialogue if he's been in the Fade before during the Circle Tower quest in Origins.
Not this again. This is unnatural. Stop doing this to me. Dwarves shouldn't be here. We don't dream. We sleep like a stone. That's the other thing. What kind of dreamland doesn't have oiled wenches waiting to flock Oghren's banner of love? No, it's just demons. Angry demons that want you dead, hungry demons that want you dead, and demons that look like oiled wenches but want you dead anyway. Sod.
The expansion has been redeemed. I'll talk more about this later, though let's get back to the Fade. So this version of the Fade is a lot simpler than Origins, as it's a fadified reflection of the Black Marsh, meaning all those fade walls we saw are not present. I think most people like this version more, and I'm probably of the minority that liked Origin's Fade scene of rescuing your companions and having 4 forms, which was really memorable in my opinion. I just wish after you freed your companions they joined you, since I think that is what added to the slowness of the Fade section, because the game is not built for single combat. Still, the mechanic of your actions and puzzle solving having an effect on the waking world is very interesting, and it leads to one of the cooler armors in this expansion. Since this is the Fade, we can actually see the spirits of the villagers who once lived in the village of Black Marsh. They all seem to bring up a lady with great fear behind her name. One soul tells us a bit about what the lady did before fleeing into a crypt of all places. Well, after killing some undead, we can check on her to see if she's alright and...
So you came, fell into my little trap.
Not again. You have a knack for stumbling into traps, don't you?
Yeah, she's a demon, and killing it releases the soul who willingly gave her soul to a demon. I guess we don't really know, but she's free to pass on now. Alternatively, we can just intimidate the demon and she walks away. After fighting through the crypt, we reach the center of the village where most of the spirits are trapped in their own minds, being tortured by the lady. Well, at the center we see a few freed villagers, led by a spirit of justice of all things. This spirit has liberated the villagers from their torture and wants to take the fight directly to the Baroness, who must be the lady the other villagers were talking about. Well, in one of the few and far between times, we can actually make a moral decision and side with either the spirit of justice or the Baroness. Meeting with the Baroness, we can see she's as blatant of a Disney villain as the villagers described. But we're not in Dragon Age 2 yet, so morally gray mages are absent. However, I don't mind her being blatant in this regard, since this is the only time outside of Loghain's word of mouth that we can see the horrors of the Elysian occupation, at least in the video game sense. There is a novel that does cover that. I know this is an extreme example, but the fact something like this could be allowed is a very horrifying thought, and it makes Loghain's paranoia more justifiable against Orlais. So this moral choice, however, is a choice between one good option and one evil option, with a small personal benefit to the evil option. Neither has any short-term or long-term consequences. The first will join the other side you didn't, and after the fight, the Baroness will sacrifice the first to send her and us back to the physical world. Also, the first has been betrayed by 2 maternal figures in one day. He is going to have a lot of trust issues. Well, if he wasn't dead. Well, since the spirit of justice was in between us during the final fight, he has been placed in the body of the deceased Kristoff, to his horror at being in the mortal realm. We can offer to kill him if that will help, but his spirit sense has detected that the Baroness is nearby and has to be slain. He explains that she is now an abomination, though he doesn't call her that specifically since he understandably doesn't know the word. Since he's so determined to kill her, he joins our party as our last companion. Well, whatever the Baroness has done has made the Veil worse, and Fade Rifts pop up everywhere, foreshadowing Inquisition and supplying endless demons until we close them. Grabbing the now available Sentinel armor and slapping it on Justice, we can confront the Baroness, who turns into a Pride Demon. But unlike the Aldred fight, she rips open Fade Rifts and even changes locations halfway through, so definitely a fun but relatively short fight. After the fight, Justice is so relieved he accomplished his goal that he ignores the fact that he is currently on fire. He's confused at what to do next, but fortunately the 3rd degree burns allow him to access Kristoff's memories of being a Grey Warden, and asks our advice on what to do next. We tell him to avenge Kristoff's murder, and with that he joins our party permanently. Last companion get. We never did fight our boss monster though. So using the Baroness's key, we can grab the last dragon bone and complete the head. Lightning cracks and something flies overhead. Approaching up the now open stairs, we see a spectral high dragon, which is of course our boss monster material. This is without a doubt the most fun boss fight out of DAO and its expansions. The dragon has more HP, a updated UI, a stronger AoE attacks, and it can go into a wisp mode and summon 8 wisps around it that if we don't kill will heal the dragon, and many players will be tripped up by this their first time. This dragon made me focus on positioning in a way I haven't had to do in all of Awakening, and I highly recommend fighting the Queen on Nightmare at least once in your career. The dragon also has some interesting lore to the Black Marsh. Apparently, the dragon appeared back before the Baroness's fall into the Fade. The Eye Dragon killed her subjects, and since she needed her stock to do blood magic, she decided to kill the dragon. But since she couldn't kill it conventionally, she severed the dragon's soul into the Fade and had the pieces scattered around the marsh when the dragon's soul came back even after death. Bringing the bone back to Wade allows us to forge a legendary sword, the strongest weapon we can get in Awakening. And since we finished all 3 main quests, we have all the pieces we need to finish it. Well, since we only have the final battle left to go, it's time to cover all the companions first. I'll go in order of their recruitment just to have some order here. I'm going to count this analysis as my origin analysis as well. Oghren in Origins was someone who, on the surface, was offensive, drunk, and pervy, and as a result, most players rightfully don't want to dig much deeper than that. If you do, you'll find someone who is using alcohol and humor to cope with loss and low confidence. Oghren was once a decorated and skilled warrior. Because of his fame, Oghren was set up with an arranged marriage to a relatively wealthy smith named Branka. While Oghren was ill-prepared to cope with an arranged marriage to someone who was so different than him, and Branka becoming a paragon only furthered his inadequacies, especially once all of Oghren's family sided with Branka and resented Oghren's drunkenness and inability to handle noble life. When Branka took her house, she took Oghren's family too. Left by himself, his drunkenness peaked, and he ended up killing a noble in a first blood proving match, which exiled him from any warrior class duties. By the time we meet him in Origins, after what happened with Branka's house and his family, we are dealing with someone who really doesn't have anything to live for, which is why he's willing to become a surface dwarf by joining our party. If we do befriend him, we can get more insight into his weird feelings, and not only give him purpose as a warrior again by being his war buddy, but also rekindle his confidence by finding him a new relationship in Felsi. He also has one of my favorite quotes in all of Dragon Age, if you've done all of this for him. While in Awakening, Oghren's purpose has been strongly revitalized after his adventures in Origins. The fact that he has a purpose as a warrior in a Grey Warden strengthens that tenfold. However, his personal confidence is still wavering. We can have several conversations where he mentions Branka. The train wreck of a relationship clearly still has deep roots in him, and it appears that he still applies his trauma from Branka into his new relationship with Felsi. We can learn this after traveling with Oghren and getting his approval up to warm. The next time we enter the keep, Felsi is there demanding to see him. Well, Felsi reveals that she kicked him out, but that he was just looking for an excuse to leave anyway. Oghren says that he's not a family man, and he is finally in a place where he belongs. Then she drops the real bomb, as she leaves frustrated that she and the baby will have to make do without him. Oghren shrugs this off and asks to get back to killing, the one thing he knows he can do. Well, just like in Origins, he doesn't want to talk about his true feelings until he feels close enough to confide to you. Meaning friendship level approval. Now, the one thing I do wish is that if you achieve friendship in Origins, it carried over here. I mean, maybe a direct import isn't possible, but a special dialogue which raises approval to friendship would have been very useful, and would have continued if you did have a warden with that friendship. Unfortunately, Oghren is a sad case that continues on in this game. It follows the same curse that other companions have, where my warden from Origins doesn't feel like the same person. Despite 2 or 3 conversations with Oghren, he doesn't reference specific details about our adventures, and the fact that we have to rekindle a friendship from scratch is just further proof. But I'll be going more into that with the other companions, but the lack of a friendship carrying over really does add on to what I'm going to say. Once we do achieve friendship with Oghren, we can finally sit down with him and talk about what happened. He laments that the relationship with Felsi could have never worked out, which I agree with given his trauma with Branka. A romantic relationship isn't in the near future for him, but that he feels terrible about his son. He struggles with a decision because on one hand he made mistakes taking care of him immediately, and his low confidence sprung up again, urging him to leave. On the other hand, as a man, he naturally feels like he should be a role model and father figure. Well, we can choose whether or not he should be in the child's life in a kin similar to hardening in Origins. And personally, I always choose to tell him to take an active role, not only for his son's benefit, but for his own, since I can't tell it is really what he wants. Plus, our warden proofreads his letters and promises to vouch for him, which ties a bow on a great friendship for our warden. Overall, Oghren is one of my favorite companions, not only because of the unique and funny dialogue given by Steve Blum, but also because there's a great friendship and a genuine bond between the Warden and Oghren. I'll leave a few party banters to wrap him up.
You're rending Howe's little blighter.
That's one way of putting it.
You certainly got stones coming back here after your family was disgraced. I respect that.
You do?
Yeah, throw caution to the wind, run headlong into danger, and sod the consequences. That's the only way to live.
Thanks. I think.
Yep. Don't you give a piss what the others think. Oghren's got your back.
Why do your people revere the stone so much?
It's because we come from the stone. When we come out of our mothers, we're small, round rocks. Pink-streaked rocks are girls, and gray ones are boys. The rocks must be dipped in lava for a few moments each day to keep warm. Every year, a few unlucky parents drop the rock into the lava and can't get it out. Very sad, but you do it right, and in a few weeks, the rock cracks open, revealing a bouncing dwarven baby.
Like an egg? That can't be right.
Are you questioning dwarven nature and tradition? I'm insulted.
It's difficult to talk about Anders since I do want to do a Dragon Age 2 video after this. I'll focus on what themes Anders brings to this game and ignore any future predictions to save spoiling myself or seeming foolish explaining retcons. The first interaction we get with Anders is thankfully a selfless one. Despite being an apostate on the run, he stays to help clear out the Darkspawn and save lives. This is good because when he shows signs of fear or apprehension later on, we won't take it too seriously because we know he's willing to put aside his own wants and fears for others. The first few conversations we can have with him involve his primary goal of being personal freedom. Usually when someone is this focused on freedom, they came across as selfish or corrupt, but Anders' personal freedom is really just being able for mages not to need permission to exist. At this stage, it's clear Anders wants a strong reformation of the Circle, but still wants the core aspects of the Circle to remain. His views on the Circle, though, are coincidentally a good first step into the themes of Dragon Age 2, as up to this point the Circle has been presented as an uncomfortable necessity. As the two mages we meet have deep opinions on the Circle is Morrigan, whose view on the world is still fairly new and doesn't have any experience with the Circle personally, and Wynne, who has deep experience with the Circle, but who is a pure Circle loyalist at the end of the day. Anders' Awakening is the first character that got me to start thinking on how the Circle can change. Of course, since Anders' character is intertwined with the Circle, his quest involves that too. While we in Amaranthine, Anders can meet an elf named Namaya, who gives Anders information on a Circle cache containing his phylactery. Anders must have contacted her before going into the Wardens. Well, Anders wants to still destroy his phylactery because he thinks the Circle may try to overrule the Wardens, which I think would be impossible for the Circle to do, especially just 6 months after the Wardens ended the Blight. But hey, it's free XP. Well, unfortunately, heading into the warehouse, we find only a Templar ambush, led by the Templar who wanted to execute Anders during the prologue. She says the Chantry overrules the King's and the Warden's rule on this matter, which is just pure police lies in all honesty. Then she commits suicide by the hero Ferelden himself. Anders thanks us for standing by him, and the quest ends with us earning the friendship of the sassy mage. Interestingly, we can betray Anders to the Templars here if we want to be complete assholes, but I'd never do that to him. After backing him against the Templars and giving him a cat, which is a great interaction that has gameplay and dialogue changes, we can earn his friendship. We've become the first place where Anders is happy to choose to be here, not forced to. This is a theme with almost all the companions in Awakening, as not earning the friendship of a companion causes them to leave the Wardens at the endgame, because their character didn't help them find a reason to stay. Overall, Anders in Awakening is a great intro to Dragon Age 2, ironically, as well as a great comfort character in Awakening, whose sarcasm can rival that of both Morrigan and Alistair. His livability is only matched out by Sir Pounce-A-Lot.
I understand that you struggle against your oppression, Mage.
I avoid my oppression. That's not quite the same thing, is it?
Why do you not strike a blow against your oppressors? Ensure they can do this to no one else.
Because it sounds difficult?
Apathy is a weakness.
So is death. I'm just saying. So, you're a Howe.
Do you have a point, mage?
Hey, I'm fond of the Hows. I'm also fond of the whys, the whos, and the whats.
How clever.
Oh, it's shameful how long it took me to come up with that.
So, spoiler warning, Nathaniel is my favorite companion in Awakenings, as well as top 5 to 10 in all of Dragon Age games. Just getting that out of the way. Nathaniel is, of course, the oldest son of Rendon Howe. However, he never had a real interest in politics, instead idolizing his ancestors who fought in the Ferelden rebellions against the Orlesians. Well, when Nathaniel became an adult, his father wanted him to train to be an accomplished warrior, so he trained in archery under a chevalier who operated in the Free Marches. Nathaniel trained there as a squire, living a much simpler life than he accustomed to, but becoming a hardened warrior as a result. Nathaniel's hope was to become a full knight, then return to lead the family's army. However, the events of Origins and Wending Howe's crimes struck first. When word spread of the Howe's criminal and traitorous actions, Nathaniel left the service of the Chevalier to save him public embarrassment. With no family and no resources, he begrudgingly went back to Ferelden. The training and career prospects that he had worked so hard over the years to achieve were annihilated in just one action. Nathaniel went back to his home of Vigils Keep for revenge and unfinished business. Back to where we meet him, Nathaniel at first wanted to kill us, but decided revenge wouldn't solve anything, which presents a remarkable cool head, despite being in a place where he had lost everything. What really catches my eye about Nathaniel that no one else in Awakening does is that if you send him away when you first meet him, he will stop you on the road outside of the keep and ask you to make him a Grey Warden. He wants to do his part against the Blight, because his father didn't. Even though he blames the Wardens for his father's death, he appreciates the compassion shown to him for sparing his life, and sees the bigger picture, which is really respectable. Once Nathaniel joins the Wardens, he opens up a lot more about his personal history. How his childhood was tumultuous due to his parents fighting and harsh expectations, how the keep servants actually raised him, and that his grandfather was a Grey Warden, who was disowned by his father as a result. This is because Rendon Howe saw him joining the Wardens as nothing more than a neglect of his noble duties. His grandfather becoming a Warden may also explain why he was so willing to become one himself. Above all else, Nathaniel's main struggle is what happened to lead to his father's death. He didn't have delusions of his father so much as he still looked up to him, and believed he was more misguided than evil. If we try to poke at him about it, he will always have an explanation. Even if we are a Kuzlin and try to mention what Howe did to our family, he will exposit the same excuse Rendon gave about the Kuzlins being traitors. Well, thankfully his personal quest can clear things up for Nathaniel. We can meet a groundskeeper at the keep who Nathaniel recognizes from his childhood. He really just wants answers on how his brother and sister died. However, the man reveals his sister is still alive and married a merchant in Amaranthine. Everybody at first believes this marriage was an act of desperation, since the Howes lost all title and property. However, when we find her in the city, she's happy, and had married a husband to get away from her father's evil. Nathaniel is shocked to hear her say that, but after catching up and coming back, he starts to finally believe that what happened is all his father's fault. Shortly after this, the quest ends. He apologizes to us for blaming the Wardens and you for his father's death, and his family's fall from grace. We can tell him that none of this was his fault, and that we don't blame him for wanting to believe his own father was a better person. He even considers us a friend now, but of course asks if he's reading that wrong too, which is cute. Nathaniel is also one of the most morally aligned companions because of his calm demeanor, and I often find myself agreeing with a lot of his standpoints, since he has demonstrated himself as someone who really thinks out his decisions before acting or speaking, even recognizing that his understandable blame of the Wardens was entirely short-sighted. This kind of reflection is something sorely lacking from every other companion in our party, who often made a poor decision in the moment and are now trying to atone for the aftermath of that decision. All these qualities Nathaniel has, plus his birthright as the heir to the Howe family, really makes me believe the writers were setting up Nathaniel to be the rise of a great leader within the Wardens. I bring this up now because when I see the Warden representative in Inquisition, I always wonder why Nathaniel wasn't an option, either replacing Stroud or being an option before Stroud. I'm not saying this just because he's my absolute favorite, but rather the setup given to him in Awakening in the state of panic the Wardens are in, I can see Nathaniel being one of the few with a clear head and not wanting to act out of rash fear or personal gain, like his father. Plus, in Dragon Age 2, we already see him carrying out a leadership role within the Wardens. Also, no matter who I play in Origins, I always see Nathaniel more than other companions to patch the leadership torch within the Wardens, should something happen or should my Warden try to leave, which often does happen in the epilogues. More than likely, this wouldn't have been possible because Awakening was an expansion which naturally would not have been played as much as the mainstay games, and given the limited options in the Keep, I'm not too hopeful of Nathaniel's return eventually. However, given Nathaniel is one of the only options there in the Keep, maybe BioWare will expand on his leadership in the future. Overall, what else can I say other than Nathaniel's my favorite? I really just wish we could have more dialogue or information about him, but there have actually been a few standalone adventures of him if you want to check those out. Really do give him a chance. He is a very fascinating character, so good job on BioWare for that one.
You believe that your ancestors used to be immortal?
I don't believe it. It's true.
How do you know?
Why would the Elders lie?
Why, indeed.
So you don't believe the Elves were immortal?
When did I say that?
You asked me if I believed that my ancestors were once immortal.
And where in that question was it implied that I believed otherwise?
Then you do believe that the Elves were immortal?
I didn't say that either.
You are exasperating.
Do you do anything besides ponder what is just and unjust?
It is not all I do. It does, however, define my being.
So you were born just? A little self-righteous baby of justice crawling around the Fade?
I was not born. I simply am.
Isn't that name a little ridiculous?
What do you think I should call him? Frederick?
There are worse names, I suppose.
Sigrun is a pure mix of perky and sardonic. She's most notable as being one of the only dwarves we can really get to know, and she's a perfect example as to why the caste system in Orzammar fails. Unlike Oghren, Sigrun has been casteless before being thrust into deep roads all of her life, so outside of Dwarven culture she really has no idea about the outside world, and is far more curious than any other companion about nature, books, and other races. But beyond curiosity, Sigrun's caste and position in the Legion of the Dead have defined her entire outlook on life. Being casteless, she had to keep her wits about her and be resilient just to survive, all the while other dwarves would treat her like the lowest form of scum there is. In order to survive, like most casteless, she had to go under the Carter's thumb, proving to her society she is scum and a criminal. As such, when she joins the Legion, she wants to finally prove she is more than how others viewed her. She wants to show she can do something honorable by dying in the deep roads in service of the Dwarven people. As such, the best gifts we can give her are items that will help her kill Darkspawn and satisfy her curiosity of the outside world. Despite her apparent obsession with death, when her squad was ambushed in Kal Hirol, she fled, leaving with her a survivor's guilt that fueled her obsession even more. And as such, when we meet her, she's constantly trying to hurl herself into dangerous situations, or situations that are naturally heroic, for her to do some good before she dies. Sigrun also references her only friend in Legion, Varland, who taught her how to read and gave her her philosophy on the Legion of the Dead already being dead. This was Sigrun's only friend, and his death of Kal Hirol has left Sigrun with no other purpose in life, other than to fight Darkspawn. However, giving her some closure on a previous dark part of Sigrun's life may make her more comfortable with her survivor's guilt. Now, full disclosure, her quest is 100% bugged, as if you've done the Law & Order quest in Amaranthine on the side of the guard, the NPC we need for this quest will never respawn to start Sigrun's quest. BioWare never released an official patch, but fortunately someone made a home remedy and saved it on the Nexus mod, so that's what I did. I'll link the fix in the description, and don't worry, it only fixes the quest as intended, so it doesn't sully a purist playthrough. When walking through Amaranthine with Sigrun, we can encounter a dwarf named Mika. Well, when Mika sees Sigrun, she immediately flips out at her, and for good reason. Apparently Mika gave Sigrun work despite being cashless, trying to keep her out of trouble. But this arrangement went south when a noble's stolen property wound up in her shop, and as a result, Misha wound up exiled to the surface. Sigrun admits to placing it there, but only because the Carter leader Barat forced her to under threat of death. Misha doesn't want to hear this and storms off. Back at the keep, Sigrun mentions more as to what happened. She tells us how Sigrun was caught by her stealing some food, but instead of turning her in, she paid for the food. Misha wanted to make a difference in the lives of one castless, who she knew had no options for income, and gave her odd jobs to keep Sigrun out of trouble. However, Sigrun still betrayed her when Barat threatens her, proving that no one should have ever treated her more than scum. After Misha was exiled, Sigrun had no options other than to work as a Carter enforcer, till she ended up killing a guard, which is how she wound up in the Legion of the Dead. The thing is though, I really can't blame her for this choice, other than maybe warning Misha about what's going on. Sigrun really only had the option to do what the Carter says, or her and her loved ones would die. Playing the Carter origin, we can really see how trapped Sigrun was in this situation. And I can't tiptoe around it anymore. This is really the biggest shame here. I have a Dwarf Commoner, which I played through for this video, and I tried every dialogue option in this quest as my Dwarf, who blow by blow went through the same experience as Sigrun and could relate to her experience personally. Even the Carter leader was the same, and there's no unique dialogue this whole time that may give Sigrun a more positive outlook on her sense of self, rather than what everyone says, hey, you're not that person anymore. This is what I've been complaining about with my warden not feeling like my warden anymore, and it's the most egregious example of it. Despite a handful of references, every warden origin is severely diminished in Awakening in terms of dialogue that references your character's origin, and therefore who they are. I know the reason for this too. It's because the writers had to write a character that has a new origin, and have the game still make sense. So of course this Legion Warden, who has almost no background information, wouldn't have too many rebukes from their personal life when talking with the companions. I feel like trying to work in this new origin, and then the other 6 possibilities in a short amount of development time, made this impossible to accomplish. Now Velanna is the only exception here, so I think whoever was in charge of her dialogue really took the extra consideration, but sadly, while this is the exception, the other origins come up with far more lacking, and when I feel it's blatant like this, I really feel pulled out from my character, which is one of the strongest features in Origins. To put this simply, when I would talk to a companion in Origins, I would learn more about them, and they would often ask me questions, and I could build onto my character with that as well. When I'm talking to characters in Awakening, it's completely one-sided. I'm learning about them, and I have very little that I can rebut to other than I agree or I disagree or a joke. And this lack of character building is what really does pull me out of my warden. I really do think I'm playing a separate character, despite the fact that I know I am importing the same character I am from Origins. I'm glad I finally got to talk about this. I know there's nothing to do about it now, but I really had to articulate what was going on, and I think with this whole comparison with Sigrun, I think I finally nailed it, and I think it's the biggest downfall of Awakening right here, in my opinion. Moving on, this quest does give us a choice, much like Oghren's, though it's much more about how much you're willing to help out Sigrun. Sigrun confronts Misha and apologizes to her before giving Misha Varlin's ring, to help give Misha a better life. This not only is Sigrun's only keepsake of a friend, but it's the only possession she can actually call hers, since her equipment belongs to the Legion or the Wardens. We can either let Sigrun give her the ring, as a just reparation for betraying Misha in the first place, or we can tell Sigrun to keep her ring, and simply give the cost of the ring to Misha, which is what I end up doing. Either way, Misha gets enough money to open a business, making her square of Sigrun for the business she previously lost. Now that Sigrun has done some good in the world, and that we helped her with it, she starts to reconsider her previous outlook on death. However, she is still conflicted. Not so much because she wants to die, but because she wants to keep her promise, as when she was castless, her word meant nothing. However, at the same time, we also showed her that she can do good things in the Wardens without dying. She tells us she still plans to return to the Deep Roads once the Darkspawn assault on the surface is over. Well, we can agree with her, but my favorite aspect of this is we can remind her that she lost friends, but that we don't want to lose ours, making her understand that even in the Legion of the Dead, your life can be cherished. This makes earning Sigrun's friendship even more impactful than all the other companions, As if we say this, Sigrun chooses life instead and builds a long relationship with the Wardens. But if we don't befriend her, she will return to the Deep Roads in the near future, fulfilling her promise, since she didn't have any other purpose. Overall, I love her character, and the importance of her friendship is why I always recruit her early on.
Here's your dagger back.
Did I drop this?
Oh no, I nicked it from your belt. Old habits die hard, you know.
Stealing is wrong.
Only if you get caught. And need I remind you that I wasn't caught?
I have tied my dagger to my belt. Should you try to steal it again, the rope will remind you that stealing is wrong.
But, you just told me I can no longer steal it. Why would I even try? Anyway, here's your ring back. Did you tell Velanna that dwarves are born as little rocks?
No. Maybe. Yes. Yeah. Velanna takes herself too seriously. And come on, it was funny.
All right, it was funny. You should have seen her afterwards. She was huffing like a constipated Bronto.
Hot.
You're the first elf I've ever known. Do you feel honored?
Why would I feel honored?
Your actions will influence my opinions of your race. Forever.
Oh, thank you. I needed more anxiety.
Glad to help.
Velanna is not going to be someone the player likes immediately, as unlike Nathaniel, Velanna does actively try to kill you. But more than that, Velanna has poor social skills and a pure disdain for all non-Dalish. Now, while I do think she's too extreme, Velanna's disdain for humans is understandable given her personal history and the overall oppressions elves have faced. Velanna's disdain expands far past humans, however, as she is fairly cross with all non-Dalish, particularly elves who aren't Dalish. There's a telling scene in Amaranthine where Velanna spots two city elves admiring her, since they have never seen a Dalish before. Velanna accosts them, calling them dim-witted and cowards, even claiming these are not her people, as if they don't share the same ancestors and both face the same oppression. While this at first may seem like another facet of Velanna's character and her more social ineptitudes, this actually presents a window into a running issue of the Dalish superiority, in the later games specifically. See, in Origins, the Dalish are seen as pretty accepting of all elves. The Dalish Warden clan accepts a city elf seeking a new life, and Zathian's first was a city elf slave who actually improved the relations between the races once she is made keeper. However, in Dragon Age 2, we see a half-Dalish who is not accepted in the clan, and in Inquisition we hear of violent bouts between Dalish and non-Dalish elves. So it really just shows that Dalish culture can cause feelings of superiority, but it's not guaranteed to cause this. Velanna, however, certainly has this superiority, and it makes me dislike her more for this. Velanna is intelligent and a very good representation for the Dalish, and gives us much more information on Dalish lore, which does earn some brownie points with me. Velanna's poor social skills are important because of her interest in magic and elven lore, so her time was spent reading and practicing rather than making friends and socializing when she was a kid. This explains a lot about her agitation with others and her real inability to make friends with the player or anyone really. This also explains her devotion to her sister, but also her over-reliance on her sister's opinions, as she really is the only friend Velanna has, which is a nice touch we will cover later. Velanna's interest in lore also presents her with a problem she's trying to solve. She laments that humans and dwarves have an abundance of heroes and tales to look up to, but the Dalish have lost so much history that they cherish every story they have. Now, this problem has been stated before, but it never really made sense to me, because not only does every clan have a lore keeper who tells of the history of the Dalish, but early on in Origins, we learn about Garahel, an elf who is on par with our Warden in terms of abilities, as he ended the 4th Blight and was a master on the battlefield and bed. There's also the first Inquisitor, but maybe that knowledge was suppressed by the Chantry. Well, no matter how many stories of elves we can find, Velanna wants to find new stories to pass down to her people, so our Warden can gift her a blank journal to fill in herself, which is a cute moment that shows how smart people don't always think of the simplest solution. Velanna's quest is not really a quest per se, but more so just a way to get more background information on her. While we are traveling with Velanna in a party, we can come across a random encounter, meeting some of Velanna's former clan members. They tell us how Velanna was exiled from her former clan, and the members in the Wending Woods were just a handful of the total number. Velanna laments how she's sure the Keeper is having a laugh at how poorly Velanna's exile went, to which the Elves tell her that the Keeper is dead. This hits pretty close to Velanna since, as the first, the Keeper was a surrogate mother and personal teacher to her. We can chime in to defend Velanna's growth for love for her sister, which shocks the former clan member. Back at the Keep, we can get the full story from Velanna, who tells us how humans near the Wending Woods kept trying to drive her clan away, even going as far to try to burn the clan out. Well, Velanna proposed to fight back, but her Keeper refused, stating if she wanted to do this, she would do it alone. Velanna took the few members of the clan who agreed with her and left in exile to drive away the humans. Velanna's sister only left with her to try to convince Velanna to turn back. Now, if this was a more fleshed out Dragon Age expansion, I could see the option for a choice between softening Velanna's view on humans, or basically keeping her hard and keeping her distance away from humans. However, her main goal of trying to strengthen her people would always remain the same, no matter your option. What does happen is Velanna starts to open up, and with those seeds planted, she ends up being kinder and saving humans despite her experience, which is still sweet even if our warden never personally develops a friendship with her. Overall, while Velanna never really endears herself to me, she is still a solid character who gives us a first in-depth look at the Dalish and their lore, as well as their problems.
True, the dwarves are dwindling. The Darkspawn always at the gates of Orzammar, threatening to overwhelm you.
Yes, and yes. It's only a matter of time.
We elves are few in number, and every one of us is precious. But you isolate your casteless, forbid them from bearing weapons. And you saw what happened in Kal Hirol.
Yes, well, the noble caste has a stick up its collective butt. A stick called tradition.
Why are you so loyal to your Legion of the Dead, and to Orzammar? Don't they hate you?
They do. I'm casteless, so I'm worthless to them.
And yet you'll give your life away to prove what?
That I'm more than I say I am?
You don't owe them anything. You don't need to prove your worth to them.
Maybe I need to prove it to myself.
Have I ever told you that I find tattoos on women incredibly attractive?
Have I ever told you that I find most humans physically and morally repulsive?
Good to know.
So Justice is a spirit, and comes with 3 hurdles when doing this type of analysis. First of all, he has no history or background, as in the Fade he simply seeks to fulfill his role as Justice. Second, since he's not a mortal, I can't really evaluate his traits or actions like everyone else. And third, just like Anders, I don't want to step on any toes for a future DA2 analysis. So instead of how I did everyone else, I think I'll talk about how Justice as a spirit fits in this game and the overall storyline of Dragon Age. As a spirit of justice, he is mainly naturally focused on being just, and evaluating situations in more black and white. This comes across as pretty frustrating in Awakening, as Origins has always been about presenting moral situations with usually no 100% good outcome. Instead, giving multiple perspectives and contexts which would speak to different types of people, both in-game and out. Adding a character whose personality is black and white evaluation is going to step on some toes. However, the writers didn't put Justice here to fit in well into Awakening, instead to set the stage for 2 using this character. Justice in 2 is more of a passive force in the story, but shows how spirits from the Fade can make a tremendous change to the mortal world, with both their vast knowledge and unwavering devotion to their virtue, which thematically carries over to both Cole and of course Solas's plan with the Fade in Inquisition. Justice also shows us how the Fade differs from the mortal world, and as a result how a spirit like Justice views the world at first resenting being here by force, but quickly shifting to curiosity over things like lyrium, races, and love, finally progressing into how he may stay in the mortal world more permanently, and how he might help shake the unjust systems of this world involving mages and elves, all of which is foreshadowed later on in the series, as well as being hinted in companion dialogue. Sadly, Justice's quest doesn't deal with these themes, or even much to do with his interactions with the mortal world. Instead is a cut-and-dry quest involving Kristoff's wife, the end result being a promise that Justice will only use Kristoff's body with his oath to defeat the Darkspawn army is fulfilled, which Kristoff's wife agrees to. The only foreshadowing this provides our masterclass foreshadower is the guarantee that Justice cannot remain bound to Kristoff, and instead must find a new body, one that is willing, so that Justice doesn't shift from a spirit to a demon. The writers at this point hadn't decided who yet, but they definitely were alternating between our two mages, Anders and Velanna, which shows in the conversations both have with one another. In this game, however, Justice is both the weakest and strongest narratively, as the writers branch off a lot of unique interactions from Justice, but for Justice to really flourish, the stakes of the game had to be toned down, as we are about to see in the finale where we make two very world-changing decisions. Justice is just not equipped to debate them, compared to every other character, because you can't make these decisions in black and white. However, I appreciate Justice's insight to the Fade and the twist of fate that his arrival into the world brings into Thedas.
You are correct that I do not understand, Velanna. Help me understand.
There is so much history between my kind and humans, Justice. Where would I begin?
You can only be responsible for your actions, your judgment. Does the same not apply to them?
You may be right. I don't know.
And the atonement?
I will atone when they do.
You have seen oppression and are now free. You must act to free those who remain oppressed.
Or I could mind my business in case the chantry comes knocking.
But this is not right. You have an obligation.
Yes, well, welcome to the world, Spirit.
What if you found a living body to possess?
Even if I knew how, I would not possess the living. Such is an act for demons.
What if the person were willing?
Why would a mortal ever allow such a thing?
For life. For love. Perhaps together you could do what they cannot do alone. If you gave instead of taking, I would consider you no demon.
It is something to consider. Thank you, Nathaniel.
Overall, every companion offers something good to the expansion, and Awakening would be weaker as a whole without all of them. Each has a different perspective to offer the player that gets players to start thinking about different issues down the line. Issues that the base game really hadn't touched on yet. Some of these companions have future potential, while others have their stories wrapped up as long as you take the time to befriend them. And while I do have a ranking here, and other players will have their own, I did really enjoy my time with each, and we can all agree that their party banter is hilarious. The remaining nobles that haven't been curb stomped by my warden have called a war council to discuss the growing Darkspawn situation. Well, my character can get 2 words out before Sigrun, disguised as an elf, comes running in with a message.
Commander! Commander!
What is it, girl?
Trees smell good.
Look, I'm 60 pages into the script. I might be going insane. The messenger tells us the Darkspawn horde is assaulting Amaranthine. The city defenders don't have nearly enough manpower to take them on, so it's up to the hero of Ferelden to once again turn the tide. We can only take 3 of our party with us for the seemingly final battle. All of them give a final goodbye before we go. Funnily enough, Sigrun gangs approve if we bring her to face the Darkspawn army, but Anders approves if we don't bring him. We march our one-man army over to the city to quell the horde in a scene similar to the attack on Denerim, but far less build-up than the base game. Buildings burn, soldiers scream, and everything at this point sounds like a ballad for the hero of Ferelden after everything they've already been through. After clearing the city gates, we regroup with the captain of a guard from the smuggler's quest. He informs us how the assault happened. Essentially, the children infiltrated before the initial assault to spread the blight and weaken the guard, once again showing the true threat of Darkspawn using tactics. The captain says the city is already lost, and that's when a disciple Darkspawn sent by the architect comes over to reveal the real information. So this attack on Amaranthine has turned out to be a bait from the mother. She plans on sending a second Darkspawn army to the keep. After the army in Amaranthine is done, they plan on sending it to the keep as well, to destroy the wardens utterly. So for the first time in this expansion, we have a difficult moral choice to make. I'll break this situation down for you. Amaranthine as a city is already lost. There are survivors, but as the center of trade and infrastructure, it's already gone. But the keep hasn't been attacked yet, and can be saved with little damage. However, Captain Vale says we will have to burn Amaranthine to destroy the Darkspawn here, so we don't have 2 armies pincering us. Our choice here is to save however many people are still in the city, but face the consequences of both Amaranthine's assets being destroyed, or guarantee one survives at the cost of innocence. However, we can't really know yet if civilians are still alive based on what the commander said. Our companions tend to lead towards abandoning Amaranthine. Oghren and Nathaniel state we can't save the city now, though I do like how you can ask Oghren what if his son was in Amaranthine, and he flips saying he'd sacrifice everything, even you, his best friend, which is sweet if you pass the skill check. Justice doesn't actually say much here, just saying please don't abandon the city without elaborating further, basically cementing my evaluation I gave earlier. Well, my canon choice is always to save the city, as I side with Sigrun's logic of a Grey Warden shouldn't flee and leave innocents to die to the Darkspawn. Plus, I always fully upgrade the keep, which pays off in the damage of the keep being harsh but not permanent. And most of your companions do live, though some are still fated to die unless you do save the keep. It's almost like a third option if you work for it, which is good. I always like when Bioware includes that. Since this evaluation is as detailed as I can make it, I'll show both sides. Just know the city is my canon choice. So the battle for Amaranthine is thematic, but pretty straightforward. The first half, you rally the city guards against the children, making a pretty straight loop before the guards tell you to rest in the chapel. Well, after our brief rest, a guard will come up to you and inform you that the Darkspawn are coming out of the tavern, which we know has the smuggler tunnels, but I guess the guard captain didn't tell anyone else? So the whole defending guard is shitting themselves at this surprise. We make a small joke because to us this is a normal Tuesday, and he gets super offended, like we just killed his kids and pissed on his wife, like, geez, just sit back and be carried by a wise ass, man. The second half of this fight is pretty fun though. We fight through some unique disciples that have late game skills and abilities and even some specializations to shake up combat. We also have to fight a grand total of 3 Darkspawn generals, all boss level and completely by ourselves, which is definitive proof that the hero Ferelden can solo an invading army. The last general appears with an armored ogre alpha in what is a pretty challenging fight, as you fight 2 bosses at once, but with both these threats down, the battle is over. A lot of lives were saved and the people are thankful, but the scene also illustrates it was a victory at cost. Going over to the keep side of this choice, after watching Amaranthine burn, we arrive right before the Darkspawn horde. Our companions we left behind are...
You didn't abandon me after all.
Geez, I may have to redo my whole analysis on Velanna. She showed more feelings here than any time in the main story. Either way, we can readjust our team and everyone gives us a rundown of the upgrades and soldiers we have available. Everything here is interchangeable by your choices. If you have bombs, if you equipped your soldiers, and how you ruled. All the side quests you've done reward you here in a manner very similar to the final battle in Origins. Even the war menu is similar here. As a result, if you've done everything like I have, this fight is leagues easier than Amaranthine, but also far more rewarding because your choices affect your gameplay in a really rewarding way. I only wish companions that weren't in your party at the time joined the fight in different areas of the keep. But I imagine devs are already pulling massive overtime to develop all the cutscenes and branching choices, so I really can't complain here. It's a perfect setup. Now, what I can complain about is how rewarding the keep defense is as opposed to the city battle, which is subjectively the better option to defend morally, especially if you upgraded the Vigil. I can definitely tell which path got the greater development time, and it would really have helped if there were just a few interactive choices in the Amaranthine battle, like if you sided with the smugglers, or you could have invested money in the city's defense like the keep to maybe reduce the general count by 1, and maybe the ogres are lessened just like in the Vigil keep if you upgrade the walls. Something not too intense, but something just to level the field of these 2 maps. Varel always dies halfway through the battle, in a moment that felt really forced. I can only assume it's to raise the tension, even though the catapults, multiple soldiers, and the cutscene pans are already doing plenty for the tension. However, I probably feel this way because I'm not feeling any emotion over his death. Even though he's been with us since the start of the expansion, Varel has only ever been an advisor. He's been very loyal, but we never learn anything about him personally or endears himself to us except for taking an arrow for us. But this only happens if we don't follow the conspiracy like I did in this current playthrough, but even that's just one circumstantial incident. Just like with the city, the fight ends with an armored ogre and a general, but not at the same time. Instead, in a real feat of tactical brilliance, after the ogre and every single troop is dead, the general comes screaming into the fight, to single-handedly fight the hero of Ferelden and the entire keep's troops. It's truly a real nail-biting, down-to-the-wire fight here. After the battle, the surviving Vigil members have a stroke fest of the commander before setting up shop again like nothing ever happened. No matter which choice you pick, the Darkspawn are in retreat, and the captain is able to track their movements to the Mother's Lair. It's time for one more fight. The Dragonbone Waste, as the name suggests, is a dead land of dragon corpses. This naturally desert landscape is where dragons would migrate to die because of the cold and lifeless area. The Imperium believed the Dragonbones held untapped magical power, so they built a tower here where they experimented. So as a result, there are several historical and important artifacts stored here, which is why an Alluvian may have been stored here and still working here during the Witch Hunt DLC, but that's a story for another video. This theme of bones having power would actually carry over in Dragon Age 2 in the Bone Pit, so it's nice to see this area touched up in a later entry. Being the Dragonbone Waste, there is of course a High Dragon here. If you want some lore on this High Dragon, the dragon was fine with the Darkspawn horde setting up in its hospice, even when the Civil War broke out, but 4 mortals traipsing through just made them lose their collective shit. Realistically, this was probably put here by the developers to show your character's growth, as in the base game, the High Dragon was one of the secret boss fights that would usually wipe your party a few times before you got it. But here I doubt many wardens had issues unless you were really rushing through this expansion. Now, if you were monitoring my party, you may have noticed I brought Velanna with us. This is because bringing Velanna to the final battle is the only way to get some closure on her sister. Sereni confronts Velanna as we enter the Mother's Lair, right after the dragon fight. Sereni says the Architect has treated her well, and is a visionary who hopes to help his people, i.e. the Darkspawn, just like Velanna. Velanna is confused because the Darkspawn killed her clanmates and captured her, to which Sereni just says they are childlike and can overcome their violent nature. Velanna starts to trust Sereni even if she doesn't trust it herself. This is because, like I mentioned, her devotion to her sister is the most important aspect of her. However, the Warden isn't as fooled by this, and can detect that there's definitely something wrong, not just with what she's saying, but how she's saying it. It's not blight disease because she's coherent, however her mind is definitely not fully her own, as even if we offer to help her if she comes with us, she refuses nervously. Even if Velanna can't truly see it, Sereni is being controlled by the Architect, at least partly. And with that she runs off, but doesn't join with the Architect after, which is very significant. We fight through some Darkspawn, who are finally stacking more unique units of Disciples and Armored Ogres, which fills the overgrown Blighted theme well. Given that this is a Tevinter ruin, we also gain access to Tevinter technology, which comes in the form of assembling crystals into 3 main towers. I'll go over more of this in depth, but first there's the small matter of the most important conversation in this expansion, and probably Dragon Age Origins as a whole. The Architect ambushes us, but tries to actually talk with us instead of putting us to sleep this time. He apologizes for what happened in the mine and says he simply wanted to talk to us before we escaped. He says he only put us in cages to prevent violence that happened at Vigils Keep at the start of the expansion. He asks us to hear him out, and even though the first excuse he mentions sounds like bullshit like our companions point out, I'll at least hear him out. He tells us that he started awakening the Darkspawn to combat the Blights, which he says kills thousands of his kind. When a Darkspawn is awakened, they ignore the call of the old gods, and they're able to think for themselves, and lead others to do the same. The key component of this awakening is, well...
To break the cycle, my brethren must be freed of their compulsion. For that, I need Grey Warden blood.
See, a Grey Warden who accepts the taint within them gains a resilience to the Blight, We learn this in the Dalish Elf origin, or in Dragon Age 2. The Architect has found a way to harness this resilience from Grey Warden blood, and with it, Darkspawns can ignore the old god's call, and gain higher brain function. Some, he says, like the Mother, have reacted poorly to being free, so forgive me for going on a nerd rant here, but there is actually a reason for why Broodmothers go insane versus regular Darkspawn, and it is important to note the big flaw in his plan. I'll just go over this one as I need an entire separate video to pick apart everything in the Architect's plan. See, a Darkspawn is born a Darkspawn, and has always been a soulless husk to serve the old gods. However, Darkspawn can't reproduce by themselves, so they kidnap mortal women and force-feed them Darkspawn corpses to corrupt them with the Blight, and do other horrible things to women, which has likely caused Broodmothers to be shadow banned by the writers, as after awakening we never see or really hear of any of them. However, since they were mortal women, how would a joining ritual work on them rather than a Darkspawn? Well, they may realize that they are an immobile Darkspawn factory. They may remember that they were once human. They may even remember details of the tortures the Darkspawn put them through. All of these things by themselves are reasons for Broodmothers to go insane, not even counting losing the old god's voice, which seems to lull gullified humans into a state of compliancy, as we see this with the Mother and Ruck from Origins. Not to even mention that since a Broodmother isn't a biological Darkspawn, who's to say the joining works the same for them? It's almost certain the Architect knows this, but doesn't really think about the consequences of awakening a Broodmother who was once immortal. As to him, nothing is more important than ending the Blight. It's also important to note here that his only assistants that he currently has as of awakening are females, and they definitely are suffering from Blight poisoning, so there might be some disturbing hidden reasons behind that. All of this is really what defines the Architect. He does have good intentions, or at least appears to have good intentions, but would do anything to carry them out if he could. If he could push a button that would kill a nation, but also kill the last two old gods, he would, without hesitation. In some ways, he is correct. He is like a warden, willing to do whatever is necessary to end the blights, but he certainly stretches that belief harder than any warden in history, and it certainly seems like he makes others make the sacrifices for his goal, rather than him making the sacrifices. The indecision comes down to whether or not your warden can side and trust the Architect's plan. Each of your companions gives their opinion on this, and in one of those rare times in BioWare, I actually believe all of these opinions are in character for them. If you're wondering what I mean, sometimes characters in Dragon Age take a side even though their character would have no reason to have this line of thinking. See Zevran and the Anvil of the Void decision, or Anders and selling Fenris into slavery as extreme examples of this. But here I see everyone's viewpoint as pretty valid. Oghren hopes the lack of a Blight and awakened Darkspawn will alleviate the looming threat to Orzammar, which would concern the soldier who's lived there all his life. Anders doesn't trust the magical ritual the Architect proposes, and the thought of milking Grey Warden blood is also very disturbing to him. Nathaniel sees the Blights as a cycle of violence, and rationally is willing to take a risk if it means an end or a change to this violent cycle. Velanna has dropped her normal calculating pessimism in light of trusting her sister, who, as I have said, is the most important person in her life, so she's willing to drop her pessimistic attitude off of her sister's own word. Sigrun has spent the last years fighting Darkspawn, and just had all of her old friends die to intelligent Darkspawn. She sees the threat of intelligent Darkspawn from a tactical view, and the buff they could get would put more people at risk in her eyes. Justice heard the Architect's speech like he was a Charlie Brown adult and doesn't care at all about the Architect's plan. Justice just wants you to put down this fucker for being unjust. And you know, by Justice logic, he's right, but I'm wondering what injustice that he thinks he's done, since there's no way Justice knows everything the Architect has done. I think I do see where his logic is at, though. See, since the Architect freed the Mother and several other insane Darkspawn, Justice could see the Architect as partially responsible for every death, including Kristoff's. Essentially, all the deaths caused by the Mother's Darkspawn are blamed on the Architect in his eyes. Okay, see, that makes sense. I just wish he would elaborate on that, but I asked that of Justice for about half of the words out of his mouth, so I don't expect it now. Also, if we do side with the Architect and don't pass a speech check, Sigrun and Justice will try to kill the player, which I can see happening. If we side with him, he helped us against the Mother, but if we side against him, we fight and kill him in a surprisingly easy fight. However, spoiler, I doubt he is truly dead here. We learn about Corypheus, one of the original Darkspawn, who was a Tevinter High Priest, who entered the Golden City, and was cursed with creating the first Darkspawn, a story we hear at the start of Origins. While the Architect has always been rumored to be connected to Corypheus, given the similar appearance and the dialogue in the Legacy DLC comparing the two, especially by Anders. In 2018, the link was confirmed, and the Architect was named the then High Priest of Nathaniel. However, the Architect has no former memories of his time as a High Priest in Tevinter, or at least so he claims. If you do believe the Architect is lying here, by all means, this is justification enough to kill him. He could very well be, given a lot of his actions, but I do tend to side with the fact that he doesn't have his memories, because that would be really hard to cover up. However, since the Architect is related to Corypheus, it is likely he shares Corypheus' powers of being able to transfer his being into other blighted creatures. Well, guess what blighted creature is missing from this encounter? This also adds to a slide in the epilogue that happens regardless of the Architect's fate. Velanna claims to have seen Serani in the Deep Roads before running after her, never being seen again. It's not known yet if BioWare has future plans for the Architect, as plans did have him involved in Inquisition, but they were scrapped. Just know the writers have the capabilities to bring him back if they want to, and I do hope they do, because what we have here is a role-changing choice involving a possible new race of people in form of the Disciples. And while canonically I can't trust the Architect here, I hope this setup is touched up on in the future. There is one last interaction with the Architect, only available if we side with him. When we confront the Mother in the final room, the Architect appears spiritually, as he states he can't confront the Mother directly. The Mother reveals that the cause of the last blight was because the Architect attempted the joining ritual on the old god Nathaniel, which advanced the process of the creature becoming an archdemon. So to summarize, the Architect is responsible for the creation of the Darkspawn, the fifth blight, and the events of Awakening. And still, players to this day will take his side, which really shows just how well done they made the Architect's plea. The Mother is the final boss here, and it's certainly a worthy fight. Not only is she tanky, but she has a never-ending horde of children and tentacles. She can also pick up a party member similar to an ogre, and will likely kill them if they aren't tanky beyond belief. This is one of the few fights I had to reload on max difficulty, as it should be. We also get some buffs here in the form of the Architect spell, a fire spell from one of the Tevinter towers, a stun spell from one of the towers, and a heal spell from one of the towers. They don't help a lot, but they do at least mix up combat a bit, and I think it is a worthy addition for the final fight. The Mother is also a proper end villain for Dragon Age Origins. Unlike the often used mindless monsters, the Mother is a conscious while still insane, however almost tragic, as she was given consciousness without her consent, and she feels nothing but anger and resentment now. The tragedy is only amplified when you realize what a broodmother is. With her death marks the end of the expansion, and really the end of your Warden's mark on the world, as of the last two DLCs, Armgarok and Witch Hunt, were more minor in scales. The epilogue slide plays just like Origins, and I'm not going to go over everything, since I think slides like this should be experienced player-to-player personally. Just know the epilogue is pretty detailed, covering major and minor decisions throughout. However, the decision of the Architect is left ambiguous, only stating the Deep Roads grow quieter if we do side with him. Even in later games, the Architect surviving is still a bit of a toss-up. We hear a little bit of altered lines, but he really has been quiet the last 10 years of gameplay that we've seen. Well, with about 2 hours now done, I can safely say I have covered everything about this expansion that I really can say. Overall, I think Awakening is a really strong addition to Origins. It adds everything we liked from Origins and even improves gameplay, especially to balance out warriors and rogues in comparison to mages, which was very needed change, as I actually found playing a warrior in Awakening fun in a way I never did it for me in the base game. I really do suggest that if you like Origins' story and characters, but couldn't stand gameplay, which is probably half the community, to give Awakening a try. The improvements are noticeable. Origins was and always will be my favorite game, so despite my gripes, I really did love playing through Awakening. I'd say the only major problem I faced was companions not getting enough fleshing out because of the total length of the expansion, as well as the whole Orlesian origin problem, which I did cover numerous times. The immersion break was really hurting me, but I still had a really good time. If this expansion could have had a few more dialogue tweaks, then it could have truly contended with the base game. However, I can tell by doing this review that a big goal based on the companion themes is a setup for Dragon Age 2, and its own character themes, and I'm really excited to play through and analyze Dragon Age 2, which is something I haven't felt in however many years. Thank you all very much for watching. I have never done a video this length before, but now that it's done, I feel relief. This is something that I've wanted to do for years. Feel free to check out some of my smaller Dragon Age analyses, and I really hope to start uploading regular again. And if just 5 Dragon Age nerds like myself actually made it to the end of this video, tell me your favorite Dragon Age 2 companion and I'll argue with you stupidly in the comments. It'll also confuse everyone why we're talking about Dragon Age 2 companions in an Awakening video. Thanks for watching, folks.